Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
Murder, Lies and Hidden Letters. Chapter 1, A Whisper at the Manor. It was on an early autumn evening that Allan Pinkerton first arrived at Greystone Manor, summoned by a letter whose careful hand had betrayed more anxiety than the writer perhaps intended. The journey had been long, the mist along the English countryside clinging close to the carriage windows like pale veils. Yet Pinkerton, seated with his characteristic composure, scarcely noticed the discomfort. His mind, trained by decades of inquiry and sharpened by tireless habit, was occupied with the words that had brought him across the Atlantic. A situation most delicate, silence is imperative, lives may depend upon it. Thus had written Lady Beatrice Harrowfield, a woman of rank whose name carried whispers of both admiration and controversy in equal measure. She had requested not the police, nor even the assistance of local private agents, but Allan Pinkerton himself, the Scottish-born detective of formidable reputation. The choice, unusual as it was, intrigued him. Greystone Manor revealed itself at last through the gloom, its stone walls rising from the hillside with the air of a fortress. Ivy clung stubbornly to the facade, and tall windows glimmered faintly with lamplight. The butler, a severe fellow named Cray, ushered Pinkerton into the great hall with little ceremony. The detective's sharp gaze took in everything, the faint scuff of mud upon the marble tiles, a clock whose pendulum faltered slightly in its swing, a draught that spoke of an ill-sealed door. No detail was too small to be noted, the little grey cells, as Pinkerton liked to call them, thrived on such observations. Lady Beatrice awaited him in the drawing-room. A striking woman in her 50s, her auburn hair carefully arranged, she possessed a poise that suggested both dignity and calculation. Yet beneath her polished manner lurked an agitation she could not wholly conceal. "Mr. Pinkerton," she began, her voice measured but faintly unsteady, "you are most kind to come so swiftly. I fear I could confide in no one else. Matters are precarious." Pinkerton inclined his head slightly, seating himself with an air of calm assurance. "It is ever my custom, madam, to let the facts speak before the fears. Pray, tell me what has occurred." She hesitated, glancing toward the heavy oak door as though to assure herself it was firmly closed. "There has been a theft within these walls. A theft most dangerous, for it concerns not jewels nor gold, but papers, letters of a highly private and compromising nature. Were they to be made public, they could destroy more than reputations. They could, Mr. Pinkerton, alter the course of political affairs in London." Pinkerton did not so much as raise an eyebrow. His tone remained soft, deliberate. "And you suspect the culprit is to be found among the household?" Lady Beatrice's eyes flickered. "I do not suspect, Mr. Pinkerton. I know. The difficulty lies in proving it." It was then that others entered, and Pinkerton was introduced to the company gathered under her roof. There was Sir Reginald Harrowfield, her husband, a man of pompous bearing, his military mustache bristling with indignation at the very idea of scandal. His nephew, Lionel, thin and nervous, with a perpetual air of apology. Clara Vale, Lady Beatrice's companion, whose calm grey eyes seemed to observe more than she spoke. And finally, Dr. Charles March, the family physician, whose jovial manner appeared almost too hearty, as though designed to dispel suspicion before it could arise. Each offered courteous words of greeting, yet Pinkerton, behind his polite responses, weighed their tones, their gestures, the flicker of an eyelid or the restless shifting of a hand. For him, psychology was as revealing as fingerprints. Truth often betrayed itself not in what was said, but in what was concealed. During the evening meal that followed, conversation flowed with outward ease but inward tension. Sir Reginald spoke grandly of his regiment days, Clara Vale asked after America with practiced curiosity, Lionel stammered through anecdotes that fell flat, and Dr. March laughed too loudly at trifles. Lady Beatrice, meanwhile, grew increasingly pale, her gaze drifting often toward the locked escritoire in the corner of the dining room, the very place, Pinkerton surmised, from which the incriminating letters had vanished. At length, when the table had been cleared and port offered, Lady Beatrice contrived a reason to remain behind with Pinkerton. Her hand, resting lightly on the escritoire, trembled despite her outward calm. "The letters were here, Mr. Pinkerton. I placed them myself in this drawer, secured with a key known only to me. Yet 3 nights passed, I found the lock forced and the papers gone. No sign of intrusion, no broken window, no stranger in the house. It must have been," she stopped abruptly, as though naming the guilty aloud were too perilous. Pinkerton leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes intent. "Madam, the truth is never harmed by clarity. To conceal suspicion is to protect deceit. If you know whom you accuse, speak plainly." Her lips parted, but at that very moment, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Sir Reginald's booming voice called her name. She drew back swiftly, pressing her handkerchief to her lips. "You must discover it yourself, Mr. Pinkerton," she whispered. "For if I err, if I accuse wrongly, it will destroy us all." That night, long after the household had retired, Pinkerton remained wakeful in his guest chamber. He sat at the small desk, making orderly notes in his pocketbook, the disposition of each person, the peculiarities observed, the inconsistencies already present. He noted Lionel's nervous glances at the escritoire, Clara's measured silences, Dr. March's overeager cheer, Sir Reginald's haughty defensiveness, and above all Lady Beatrice's fear not of discovery, but of revelation. From the window he observed the grounds, the fog rolling thick across the lawns. Somewhere an owl called, its cry muffled by the mist. The manor itself seemed to brood in silence, as though guarding its secrets within stone walls that had seen centuries of intrigue. Pinkerton closed his notebook, extinguished the lamp, and allowed himself a moment's reflection. The game had begun. A theft of letters, a household rife with concealed tensions, and a lady whose courage faltered before the truth. Here lay all the elements of a mystery most intriguing. And as he closed his eyes, his last thought was not of theft nor scandal, but of motive. For Allan Pinkerton knew with the certainty of long practice that motive was the lantern by which all shadows were illuminated. Chapter 2, The Second Disturbance. The following morning dawned bleakly over Greystone Manor. A pale sun struggled through the mist, illuminating the dew-damp lawns where the gardener moved like a shadow among the hedges. Inside, the atmosphere was no less heavy. The butler, Cray, carried breakfast trays with exaggerated solemnity, and the housemaid tiptoed as though fearful of disturbing invisible spirits. Allan Pinkerton, however, had risen early, his routine as precise as the ticking of a watch. Seated in his chamber, he examined the escritoire drawer by lamplight. The marks of a small, skillful instrument, something finer than a common knife, were visible about the lock. They were not random scratches but deliberate, executed by a hand that knew what it was about. He measured them carefully with a small pocket rule, then jotted notes in his book with neat strokes. He was still at this occupation when a sharp rap at the door announced Lady Beatrice. She entered swiftly, a silk shawl wrapped tightly about her shoulders. The effort at composure was plain, but her eyes betrayed a sleepless night. "Mr. Pinkerton," she said in a low voice, "another misfortune has occurred." He rose at once, his expression grave but controlled. "Pray, madam, enlighten me." "It is Lionel," she whispered. "He has taken ill, suddenly, violently. Dr. March is with him now. They fear poison." Pinkerton did not waste words. He accompanied her at once along the corridor to a chamber at the far end. The scene within was one of confusion. Lionel Harrifield lay upon the bed, his face chalk-white, his body convulsed by spasms. Dr. March bent over him, applying a draught with unsteady hands, while Sir Reginald thundered about in agitation. Clara Vale stood apart, her hands clasped tightly before her, her calm expression barely concealing dismay. Pinkerton's gaze missed nothing. The untouched tray at the bedside contained a pot of tea and half a slice of toast. The teacup bore faint traces of a dark residue at its rim. On the small table, a bottle of tonic lay uncorked. Dr. March looked up as Pinkerton entered. His florid face was beaded with sweat. "The boy is in a bad way. Some irritant, perhaps accidental. The food may have been spoiled. Or tampered with," Pinkerton remarked softly. Sir Reginald swung round, his face crimson. "Nonsense. This house is above suspicion. Some cursed weakness in the lad's constitution, that is all." Pinkerton neither contradicted nor agreed. Instead, he knelt by the bedside, observing Lionel's restless hands. One clenched tightly about the bedsheet, the other half raised as though to ward off some invisible terror. Pinkerton leaned closer. "Lionel," he said gently, "can you hear me?" The young man's eyes flickered open for a moment. His lips formed a broken whisper, "The drawer." "I only looked." Then a violent spasm seized him, and he sank back unconscious. Pinkerton straightened slowly, his eyes narrowing. "He will recover," he asked Dr. March. "With rest, perhaps," the physician replied hurriedly. "The symptoms are not fatal. I shall remain at his side." Lady Beatrice pressed her handkerchief to her lips. Clara Vale moved forward at last, her voice calm but firm. "This proves what I feared. Someone in this house would rather kill than allow discovery. Mr. Pinkerton, you must act at once." Sir Reginald roared, "Act? Against whom?" "Against my household." "Absurd. We shall hush this up. No constable shall darken my door." Pinkerton's tone, when he spoke, was mild yet carried the authority of one not accustomed to refusal. "Sir Reginald, whether you summon the constabulary or not, the truth will enter these walls. Better it come by investigation than by scandal." The baronet glowered but said no more. Pinkerton returned to the tea tray, lifting the pot with delicate precision. He sniffed the dregs, then dipped a corner of his handkerchief into the residue, folding it neatly. A faint bitterness lingered on the cloth. His sharp gaze moved next to the uncorked bottle of tonic. He lifted it, tilting it gently. The liquid was clear, yet a faint odor, acrid, metallic, rose to his nostrils. "Curious," he murmured. "An ailment's cure turned weapon." He placed both pot and bottle carefully aside. Then, with a courteous bow to Lady Beatrice, he excused himself, declaring he must walk the grounds. Outside, the fog had lifted somewhat, revealing the rolling lawns and ancient yews. Pinkerton paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back, his eyes traveling from the upper windows of the house to the gravel paths below. It was his habit to let the mind dwell upon possibilities while the senses gathered impressions unnoticed by others. Why had Lionel spoken of the drawer? Was it confession, or fear of false accusation? Did Lady Beatrice's secret rest upon more shoulders than her own? And what of Dr. March, so quick to explain, so eager to deflect? By the time he returned indoors, a decision had formed. He requested that all members of the household gather in the library that evening. His manner was courteous, yet no one mistook the summons for a request. The library at Greystone was a somber chamber, lined with books bound in dark leather. A great fireplace crackled at one end, though the warmth did little to soften the air of unease that hung heavy over the company assembled. Sir Reginald stood stiffly by the hearth, Lady Beatrice seated in a carved chair beside him. Clara Vale occupied a corner, her stillness unnerving in its composure. Dr. March busied himself with a pipe he did not smoke. Pinkerton entered last, pausing deliberately to study each face before speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm yet carrying to every corner of the room, "an attempt has been made upon the life of Mr. Lionel Harrowfield. This attempt was not clumsy, nor born of sudden rage. It was deliberate, calculated, and executed by someone who fears discovery more than he values human life." A murmur of protest rose, quickly silenced by the detective's lifted hand. "You would all prefer silence, I know. But silence is a cloak that serves the guilty. The innocent must endure its burden. Therefore, I shall not remain idle. Already, I have observed what you hope to hide. And I shall observe further, until the truth is laid bare." Lady Beatrice drew in a sharp breath. Clara Vale's eyes flickered, the faintest trace of admiration, or apprehension, crossing her features. Sir Reginald muttered something inaudible. Pinkerton concluded with quiet emphasis, "I request that no one leave this house until matters are resolved. Should anyone attempt it, I shall consider it an admission of guilt." Then, with a slight bow, he withdrew, leaving a silence behind him more oppressive than any outburst. That night, as the household retired, each to their chamber with thoughts unspoken, Allan Pinkerton remained in the library, seated at the great table, the lamp casting its glow upon his notes. His mind sifted every gesture, every word, every inconsistency. Somewhere amid the silences and denials lay the truth. And outside, upon the misty lawns of Greystone, a solitary figure moved stealthily beneath the shadows of the yews. Chapter 3, The Shadow in the Grounds. The night air was damp and heavy with mist, yet Allan Pinkerton's mind was sharper than ever as he sat in the library at Greystone Manor. His notes lay before him in neat columns, his pocket watch ticking softly at his side. Each observation, each gesture, each inconsistency had been catalogued. Yet still, the figure glimpsed upon the grounds lingered in his thoughts like a shadow cast across the case. Shortly after midnight, he rose, extinguished the lamp, and drew aside the heavy curtains. The moon hung pale above the trees, its light diffused by a veil of mist. The lawn spread out silent and empty, or so they seemed. But Pinkerton, with eyes trained to discern the subtle from the obvious, caught movement among the yews, a flicker of darker shadow slipping between trunks. He did not hesitate. Taking up his cloak and cane, he left the library noiselessly, his steps carrying him through the long corridor and out into the night. The chill struck at once, yet he paid it no heed. He followed the gravel path toward the yews, his eyes keen, his senses alert to every sound, the hoot of an owl, the crunch of his own boots, the faint crackle of a twig broken not far ahead. At last he saw the figure more distinctly, a man, by the outline, moving quickly yet stealthily. The intruder paused at the far end of the garden, near the crumbling stone wall that bordered the estate. Pinkerton slowed, approaching with calculated silence. But before he could close the distance, the man vaulted the wall and vanished into the night. Pinkerton examined the ground where the stranger had stood. His cane's tip probed the soft earth until it struck something small and metallic. He stooped, retrieving a button, brass, with an ornate crest engraved upon it. He turned it thoughtfully in the moonlight before slipping it into his pocket. By morning, the household was astir with talk of Lionel's illness, which the doctor insisted had abated somewhat. Lady Beatrice looked pale as she received Pinkerton in her morning room. "You walked the grounds last night?" she asked anxiously. Pinkerton inclined his head. "I did, madam. And I was not alone." Her face blanched. "You saw someone?" "Indeed. A man, agile and cautious. He left behind this." He placed the button upon the table between them. Lady Beatrice reached for it, then withdrew her hand as though it burned her. "That crest, it belongs to the Harrowfield regiment. Sir Reginald has many such buttons upon his uniforms." Pinkerton watched her closely. Then either Sir Reginald wandered the grounds unannounced, or someone who would prefer to pass for him did so. Which is the more likely, I wonder? At that moment, Sir Reginald himself entered, his boots clattering on the polished floor. He looked from the detective to his wife, then to the button, his mustache bristling. "What is this?" he demanded. "Evidence," Pinkerton replied calmly. "Recovered from the gardens." Reginald seized the button, his face darkening. "One of mine, no doubt torn loose long ago. To suggest otherwise is an insult." Pinkerton bowed slightly. "No suggestion, merely observation. Yet I must ask, Sir Reginald, were you abroad last night?" "Certainly not," the baronet thundered. "I was in my chamber, asleep." Lady Beatrice gave a nervous cough. Pinkerton's eyes flicked to her, noting the tremor of her hand as she smoothed her shawl. After Reginald stormed out, Pinkerton lingered a moment longer. "Madam," he said gently, "it is ever unwise to fear what must be faced. Secrets are like shadows, they lengthen when light is withheld." She gave him a look of mingled gratitude and dread. Later that day, Pinkerton requested a quiet walk with Clara Vale. They strolled along the terrace, overlooking the gardens where the fog now clung in slow-drifting ribbons. "You observe much, Miss Vale," he said conversationally. "Perhaps more than others suspect." She gave a faint smile. "When one is employed as companion, one learns to notice without being noticed. It is the safest habit." "And last night? Did you hear or see anything?" Her grey eyes met his steadily. "I heard footsteps about the grounds. Not one pair, two. I am certain." Pinkerton inclined his head. "Your certainty is of value." "Thank you, Miss Vale." They walked on in silence, yet her words reverberated in his thoughts. Two sets of footsteps. Then the brass button might not belong to the fleeing figure at all. It might belong to the other, the unseen accomplice. That evening, when the household gathered once more in the library, the atmosphere was taut as a drawn wire. Lionel had been carried down, pale but conscious, reclining upon a chair with cushions. Sir Reginald stood like a sentinel, Lady Beatrice beside him, Clara near the window, and Dr. March puffing at his pipe with exaggerated leisure. Pinkerton placed the button upon the mantelpiece where all could see. "This was found in the gardens last night. Whether it was dropped by the intruder I observed, or by another, I cannot yet say. But I would have you all remember, silence serves only the guilty. Dr. March gave a laugh too hearty to ring true. An intruder, here. Surely, Mr. Pinkerton, you are being melodramatic. These old walls invite fancy. What you saw was perhaps a servant, restless in the night. Pinkerton's gaze sharpened. If so, then let the servant step forward. None have confessed, which suggests the prowler was no servant. And as for fancy, sir, I prefer facts. Lionel stirred weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. I told you, the drawer. I only looked. I did not take them. Sir Reginald barked, silence, boy. You disgrace yourself. But Pinkerton leaned forward, his tone gentle yet penetrating. What did you see, Lionel? The young man's eyes flickered with fear. A letter, half-written. Not mine. A hand I recognized, yet, he broke off, clutching his chest as a spasm shook him. Lady Beatrice rushed to his side, and Pinkerton raised a hand, his expression unreadable. No more for now. Rest is the greater ally. When Lionel was borne away, Pinkerton remained at the hearth, gazing into the fire. Around him, the household exchanged anxious glances, yet none dared break the silence. At last he spoke, almost to himself. Two shadows in the garden. A letter half-written. A button dropped. All fragments, yet fragments compose the whole, as the smallest tile completes the mosaic. We shall see what picture they form. Outside, the wind moaned about the eaves, and the mist pressed close to the windows as though the house itself were held prisoner by secrets. Chapter 4, The Letter Revealed. The next day at Greystone dawned brighter than those before, though the sunlight did little to dispel the house's air of secrecy. The lawns gleamed wet with dew, and the manor's windows shone like polished mirrors. Yet within, unease persisted, every gesture guarded, every word waited. Allan Pinkerton moved quietly through the corridors, his mind turning upon Lionel's cryptic words of the previous night. A letter, half-written, a hand I recognized. Such fragments, though incomplete, were like threads. And threads, when drawn carefully, revealed the pattern in the fabric. He asked to see Lady Beatrice in her drawing room that morning. She received him with an air of strained composure, her hands fussing over a vase of withered roses. Madam, he began gently, you placed the missing letters in your escritoire. Yet young Lionel spoke of a different paper, a letter half-written. Where was this kept? Lady Beatrice's composure faltered. She pressed a hand to her brow. I know not what he meant. Perhaps he was delirious. Pinkerton's dark eyes fixed upon her. Delirium often unmasks the truth more swiftly than calm discourse. If such a letter exists, we must find it. Its presence may tell us more than its words. Before she could reply, a knock at the door admitted Clara Vale. She carried a small bundle of papers, neatly tied. Mr. Pinkerton, she said quietly, this was found in the morning-room desk, tucked beneath other correspondence. I thought it best you should see it before anyone else. Pinkerton received the bundle with a bow. He unfastened the string, revealing a half-written sheet of notepaper. The ink was fresh enough to suggest recent origin. The words, though incomplete, were sufficient to raise the hair upon the neck. The letters must not fall into the wrong hands. If discovered, the scandal would ruin us both. Destroy them at once, or I am undone. The signature was absent, yet the handwriting was bold, distinctive, and familiar to those of the household. Lady Beatrice gave a sharp cry, covering her mouth with her handkerchief. That is, surely, it cannot be. Pinkerton's tone was calm but penetrating. You recognize the hand, madam? She hesitated, then whispered, "It resembles Sir Reginald's." At that very moment, the door burst open and Sir Reginald himself strode in, his face flushed. He fixed his wife with a glare before turning upon Pinkerton. "What plotting is this? Passing secret notes behind my back?" Pinkerton held up the letter. "Not plotting, Sir Reginald, investigation. This sheet was found in your household. It seems to bear your hand." The baronet's mustache bristled. He seized the page, glancing at it with narrowed eyes. For a moment he faltered, too long for innocence, before tossing it back upon the table. "A forgery," he declared loudly. "A clumsy trick. Any fool could imitate my script." Pinkerton regarded him steadily. "Imitation is possible. But forgery has its flaws. Pressure of the pen, the angle of the stroke, the rhythm of the hand, all reveal truth beyond disguise. I shall examine it more closely." Reginald blustered, but the color in his cheeks betrayed unease. Lady Beatrice sat trembling, while Clara Vale's eyes flickered between them with unreadable expression. Later that day, Pinkerton retreated to the library, the letter laid before him. He produced a magnifying lens from his pocket, examining the strokes with methodical care. Indeed, the hand bore resemblance to Reginald's, a bold flourish on the capital letters, a heavy downward pressure at the close of each line. Yet here and there were inconsistencies, a curve less certain, a loop less sweeping. It was as though the writer sought to mimic, but not flawlessly. As he bent to his work, a sound at the door drew his attention. It was Lionel, pale but more recovered, leaning weakly on a cane. "I begged Dr. March to let me rise," he said faintly. "I must speak." Pinkerton guided him to a chair. "Courage, young man. What is it you wish to tell?" Lionel's eyes darted nervously. "That letter, it is not my uncle's hand. It is Clara's." Pinkerton's brows rose slightly. "You are certain?" "I have seen her write often, lists for Lady Beatrice, notes of appointments. She copies my uncle's style at times, as amusement. But this is hers. I swear it." Pinkerton studied Lionel intently. His voice was weak, his manner hesitant, yet the conviction in his eyes was real. A new possibility opened. Clara Vale, so calm, so reserved, might be the hand behind the deception. And if so, what was her motive? Pinkerton said only, "You have done well to speak. Rest now. Leave the rest to me." That evening, when the company gathered again, the atmosphere was strained to breaking point. The letter lay upon the mantelpiece like a silent accuser. Pinkerton addressed them with his characteristic calm. "We are faced with a document of grave significance. It speaks of destroying letters, letters already stolen. It may be genuine, or it may be contrived. What matters is the motive behind it." Dr. March gave a dismissive chuckle. "Motive, always motive. What if it is merely a draft, abandoned and forgotten?" Pinkerton's gaze was sharp. "Forgotten? Hidden beneath other papers, you mean? A curious place for forgetfulness." Clara Vale at last spoke, her voice even. "Mr. Pinkerton, are we all to be judged by scraps of paper? Anyone might have written it, imitating another. That proves nothing." "On the contrary, Miss Vale," Pinkerton replied softly, "it proves intent. Whoever wrote this sought to throw suspicion upon Sir Reginald. And intent, like shadow, reveals the shape of the body that casts it." Sir Reginald puffed with indignation. "Then find the culprit, man. Expose the scoundrel, and be done." Pinkerton inclined his head. "I shall, Sir Reginald. But not by haste. Truth is delicate. It must be coaxed, not clubbed." The gathering broke in uneasy silence, each retreating to their chambers. Yet Pinkerton lingered by the fire, gazing upon the letter with narrowed eyes. Clara's calm, Lionel's conviction, Reginald's bluster, Beatrice's dread, all swirled within his mind like pieces of a puzzle half-formed. At last he folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocketbook. The writer sought disguise, he murmured to himself. But even disguise leaves its trace. A letter speaks not only in words, but in the tremor of its lines, the hesitation of its curves. And therein lies its confession. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the casements. Somewhere in the house a door closed softly, too softly for chance. Pinkerton's eyes glinted. The game was tightening. Chapter 5, Secrets in the Night. The manor at night was a brooding thing. Its corridors stretched like silent tunnels, its portraits glowered from darkened walls, and every creak of the floorboard seemed magnified in the hush. On that particular night, with Lionel weak in his chamber and a letter locked within Pinkerton's pocketbook, Greystone felt less like a home than a stage upon which hidden actors moved. Pinkerton did not sleep. Instead, he took his place once more in the library, the brass button, the tonic vial, and the half-written letter laid before him like the pieces of a chess game. The fire had burned low, and shadows danced across the spines of the books. His mind turned over the contradictions, Clara's calm denial, Lionel's insistence, Reginald's thunderous protests, and Lady Beatrice's tremulous fear. All pointed in different directions, yet all were bound to the missing papers. Near midnight, the silence was broken by a faint sound, the soft click of a latch upstairs. Pinkerton rose at once, his tread silent as he slipped into the hall. The sound came again, cautious footsteps along the gallery. He moved swiftly but noiselessly, ascending the staircase, his eyes sharp. At the far end of the corridor, a light gleamed briefly beneath a door, then vanished. He advanced, every sense alert. It was the morning room, where the letter had been discovered. Slowly he turned the handle and stepped within. The room was empty, or so it seemed. The curtains stirred faintly as though a draught had passed. But upon the writing desk lay a scattering of papers in disorder, as if rifled in haste. Pinkerton's gaze moved to the wastepaper basket. Within lay scraps of torn paper, hastily crumpled. He retrieved them, smoothing them carefully against the desk. It was a letter, or rather the remains of one. Enough lines remained legible. "I cannot bear this burden. If the truth comes out, it will be the end of me. Better silence than exposure." The signature was missing, torn away. Pinkerton's eyes glinted. Someone had attempted to destroy this confession, but imperfectly. And someone had been here moments ago. A faint sound at the window drew his attention. The latch was unfastened, the casement slightly ajar. He crossed swiftly, pushing it wide. The night air rushed in, cool and damp. Below, the terrace stretched into shadow. Had the prowler escaped that way? At dawn, the household was in uproar. Cray, the butler, announced that the morning room had been disturbed. Lady Beatrice grew pale as Pinkerton revealed the half-burnt fragments. Sir Reginald thundered about intruders and threatened to set dogs upon the grounds. Dr. March muttered darkly about hysteria and imagination. Clara alone remained composed, though her calm was beginning to appear less like serenity and more like studied control. Whoever tampered with these papers, Pinkerton declared, was desperate. Desperation reveals itself at night, when fear outruns prudence. Yet even in destruction, a clue survives. He showed them the fragment, reading aloud the lines of despair. Lady Beatrice turned her face away, unable to bear it. Sir Reginald roared, "This is forgery, again. A trick to ensnare me. Who profits from such villainy?" Pinkerton's voice was cool. "That, Sir Reginald, is the very question. Who profits? Not merely from theft, but from concealment. The thief who acts in silence fears discovery more than gain." Dr. March interjected with false heartiness. "We cannot live in a constant fever of suspicion. The boy is recovering, is he not? Let us bury this nonsense with the dawn." Pinkerton turned his gaze upon him. "And yet, Doctor, you were absent from your chamber at midnight. Your boots bore dew when you entered Lionel's room at dawn. Strange habits, for a physician." March's color rose. I was restless. The air in this house is stifling." Pinkerton inclined his head slightly, saying no more. But the remark had left its mark. Later, as the household dispersed, Clara lingered behind. She approached Pinkerton at the window, her expression composed yet tinged with something he could not immediately name. "You suspect us all," she said quietly. "I observe you all," he corrected gently. "Suspicion is a shadow that obscures, observation a lantern that reveals. Tell me, Miss Vale, did you hear footsteps last night?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. But they were not Dr. March's. They were lighter, quicker. A woman's, perhaps." Pinkerton bowed slightly. "You have been most helpful." When she had gone, he stood alone, piecing together the fragments. A button in the garden, a letter half-written, a confession half-destroyed, footsteps of two in the dark, poison in a teacup. Each clue was like a shard of glass, sharp but incomplete. But soon, the whole mirror would reflect the truth. That evening, the storm broke. Lionel, though still weak, insisted on joining the company in the drawing-room. His face was pale, his frame trembling, but his eyes burned with feverish intensity. "I can keep silent no longer," he cried suddenly, his voice breaking the uneasy quiet. "I know who took the letters." A gasp went round the room. Lady Beatrice clasped her hands, Sir Reginald started forward, Clara's calm face flickered at last, and Dr. March dropped his pipe with a clatter. But before Lionel could utter another word, he collapsed back into his chair with a strangled cry. A fresh spasm shook him, and he fainted dead away. Panic ensued. Lady Beatrice wept, Reginald shouted for brandy, Clara called for water, and Dr. March bustled forward, loudly protesting that the boy was merely weak. Yet Pinkerton, standing apart, watched in silence, his dark eyes steady. For he had seen it, the flicker of movement, the swift hand withdrawing from Lionel's cup just moments before his collapse. Someone in that room had silenced Lionel once again. And this time, Allan Pinkerton vowed, they would not escape detection. Chapter 6, The Net Tightens. By the following afternoon, Greystone Manor was no longer merely uneasy, it was under siege from within. Every member of the household seemed to carry an air of watchfulness, as though each expected accusation to fall upon them at any moment. The servants whispered in corners, the butler Cray grew ever more grim, and even the echo of footsteps along the polished corridors seemed to resound with suspicion. Pinkerton moved among them with his usual quiet elegance, yet behind his calm exterior his mind worked ceaselessly. Lionel's collapse the previous evening had not been chance, it was deliberate. Someone had tampered with his drink, and the hand that did so had been bold enough to act within sight of the others. Such audacity betrayed both fear and recklessness. At luncheon, the company gathered around the long oak table. Conversation was sparse, silver cutlery clinked against porcelain with unnatural sharpness. Pinkerton's gaze traveled calmly from face to face. Lady Beatrice, pale and fragile, scarcely touched her food. Sir Reginald blustered about politics, though his voice was forced. Clara Vale, ever composed, passed the dishes with quiet grace. Dr. March laughed too heartily at his own remarks, but his eyes flickered with unease. When the meal concluded, Pinkerton rose. His voice, though soft, carried unmistakable authority. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for clarity. You are each under suspicion until the thief of the letters is revealed. Therefore, tonight I shall test the truth. No one will leave their chamber until morning. And I shall see to it personally that no one roams the house unseen. Sir Reginald sprang to his feet, mustache bristling. This is outrageous. Am I, Reginald Harrowfield, to be treated like a prisoner in my own home? Pinkerton's dark eyes met his steadily. You may call it outrage, Sir Reginald. I call it necessity. The baronet glowered but subsided, muttering beneath his breath. That evening, the household retired early under Pinkerton's command. Cray was instructed to bolt the main doors and patrol the servants' quarters. Pinkerton himself moved silently through the corridors, marking each door. He placed a tiny paper seal, a trick of his own devising, across the latch of each suspect's chamber. Any attempt to leave in the night would break the seal and betray its culprit. At midnight, the manor lay hushed beneath a sky heavy with stars. Pinkerton, seated in the library with his watch before him, listened. The old house breathed with creaks and sighs, but no footstep disturbed its silence. Hours passed. The fire burned low. His eyes never strayed far from the pocketbook that contained the fragments of the letters. At 3 o'clock, a faint sound broke the stillness, the soft groan of a floorboard above. Pinkerton rose instantly, gliding from the library into the stairwell. He ascended without a light, his feet sure upon the steps. At the gallery, he paused, ears straining. Another sound, a faint rustle, then the click of a door. He moved swiftly. At Clara Vale's chamber, the seal was unbroken. At Sir Reginald's, intact. At Lady Beatrice's, untouched. But at Dr. March's, the paper strip fluttered loose, torn clean across. Pinkerton waited in the shadows, poised like a hawk. Presently, the doctor emerged from the morning room at the far end of the corridor. His figure was dimly lit by a shaft of moonlight through the tall window. In his hand glinted the faint outline of a poker or iron tool. Quietly Pinkerton advanced until he stood behind him. You are abroad late, doctor. March gave a violent start, the iron clattering to the floor. His ruddy face turned pale. Mr. Pinkerton. I was restless. I could not sleep. I thought a walk might clear my head. Indeed? And do you usually clear your head with an iron tool in hand, and a rifled desk before you? March stammered. I merely checked the room, thought to ensure nothing more was amiss. Pinkerton's tone remained calm. Your seal is broken, sir. The truth is written upon your door. The physician drew himself up with sudden defiance. Very well. I sought the letters. Why not? They concern us all. But I am no poisoner, and no thief. I meant only to see for myself what was hidden. Pinkerton regarded him steadily. Perhaps. Yet your eagerness betrays knowledge more intimate than you admit. You knew of the letters' hiding place. You knew of their peril. Such knowledge is not acquired by chance. March blustered further, then fell silent, perspiration standing upon his brow. Pinkerton, with deliberate courtesy, bade him return to his chamber, remarking only that his account would be considered. When dawn broke, the household gathered once more, summoned by Pinkerton's request. The detective stood before the hearth, his manner composed, his notes in hand. "Last night," he announced, "one of you left your chamber despite my instructions. That person was Dr. March." A gasp rose from the company. Lady Beatrice pressed her handkerchief to her lips, Clara's eyes narrowed, and Sir Reginald exclaimed in triumph, "Ha! I knew it. The fellow has always been too eager by half." March's color returned in a rush of anger. "Lies. I sought only to protect the household. You twist my actions into guilt." Pinkerton raised a hand for silence. "No verdict is given yet. But each falsehood narrows the circle. The thief is afraid, so afraid he has twice risked exposure to silence a witness. That is desperation. And desperation will soon betray the hand that wields it." His eyes moved deliberately from face to face. None could endure his gaze without faltering. Lady Beatrice shifted uneasily, Reginald glowered, Clara's calm seemed newly strained, and Dr. March perspired freely. With measured finality, Pinkerton concluded, "The circle tightens. One more attempt will be made, for the guilty cannot rest. And when it comes, I shall be ready." The company dispersed in uneasy silence. But in Pinkerton's mind, the pattern grew clearer. Each night revealed not only acts but motives, greed, fear, pride, and loyalty all jostled for place in the mosaic. Soon, the smallest fragment would reveal the whole. And as he retired once more to his chamber, he allowed himself a rare smile. For already, the snare was set, and the guilty, like the moth, would rush headlong into the flame. Chapter 7, The Snare is Sprung. The mood at Greystone the following evening was like that of a playhouse just before the curtain rises. Each face was a mask, controlled, guarded, waiting. Yet beneath the surface, unease simmered. Sir Reginald fumed about his honor, Lady Beatrice's hands trembled over her embroidery, Clara Vale's calm seemed too deliberate, and Dr. March hovered restlessly, protesting his innocence at every turn. Only Allan Pinkerton appeared serene. He moved with quiet precision, as though the turmoil of the household were but ripples upon a pond in which he saw clearly the reflection of truth. In his chamber that afternoon, he had written carefully in his pocketbook, "The guilty will not rest. They will seek again the letters. Therefore, place the bait where the snare lies hidden." Thus it was that when evening came, Pinkerton announced he had secured the half-written letter and its fragments in the escritoire once more, this time under lock. He did not add that he had devised a mechanism to know if that lock were disturbed. Nor did he mention that he had concealed himself in the shadows of the library, his keen eyes fixed upon the corridor beyond. The hours crept by. Midnight came and went, and the house lay still. Then, soft as the flutter of a moth's wing, came the sound he awaited, the cautious tread of feet upon the gallery. The figure moved swiftly, with practiced stealth, pausing at intervals to listen. Pinkerton's eyes gleamed. The moment had come. He slipped noiselessly from his hiding place, following at a distance. The figure reached the morning room and entered, leaving the door ajar. Pinkerton advanced until he stood just beyond the threshold, watching unseen. By the faint glow of a shaded lamp, he saw the intruder kneel before the escritoire. Keys rattled softly, the lock clicked open. Hands rifled within, pulling forth the folded paper Pinkerton had placed there. For a moment the figure bent close, examining the sheet. Then Pinkerton stepped forward. "Curiosity, Miss Vale," he said quietly, "is a dangerous indulgence. Clara Vale started violently, the color draining from her face. The letters slipped from her grasp, fluttering to the floor. She rose swiftly, her composure cracking for the first time. "Mr. Pinkerton. You frightened me. I heard a sound. I thought to assure myself nothing more had been disturbed." Pinkerton's voice remained calm, almost gentle. "And you brought keys for that purpose? Keys that fit locks not your own. A curious precaution for a companion." Clara's grey eyes flickered. "Lady Beatrice entrusted them to me. She often does." Pinkerton stooped, retrieving the paper. He held it up between them. "This is not the letter that was taken, nor the fragments destroyed. It is bait which you have seized. That is proof enough." She drew herself up with sudden dignity. "You accuse me unjustly. Yes, I opened the desk. Yes, I wish to know the truth. Who would not, in a house so shrouded in secrecy?" At that moment, footsteps approached. Sir Reginald burst into the room, followed by Lady Beatrice and Dr. March, all roused by the commotion. "What is this?" Reginald thundered. "What devilry is here?" Pinkerton faced them calmly, the letter in his hand. "The devilry, Sir Reginald, is theft and deceit. Tonight I laid a trap, and Miss Vale was caught within it." A gasp escaped Lady Beatrice. Dr. March gave a short, nervous laugh. Clara, however, stood composed once more, her hands folded before her. "If I am guilty of curiosity," she said evenly, "I do not deny it. But theft? Poison? Lies? That, sir, I refute." Pinkerton's eyes narrowed. "And yet, twice young Lionel has been silenced when he sought to speak. Twice, poison touched his lips. Tell me, Miss Vale, was that also curiosity?" For the first time, her composure wavered. A shadow crossed her face. But before she could reply, Lionel himself appeared at the doorway, pale but determined, supported by Cray the butler. His voice trembled, yet rang clear. "It was not Clara," he said. "It was—" A crash interrupted him. Dr. March had lunged forward, striking the table so violently that the lamp toppled, sending shadows leaping across the walls. "This is madness," he shouted. "We cannot hound each other like wolves. The boy is delirious, the letters are trifles, let us end this farce." Pinkerton's voice cut through the uproar like a blade. "Enough. The farce ends when truth is spoken. And truth is nearer than you all suppose." He replaced the paper within his pocketbook, closed it with deliberate care, and looked around the room. "Tomorrow, I shall reveal the thief, the poisoner, and the deceiver. No one will leave this house until then. The snare has sprung, and the guilty stands among us. Tonight, they tremble. Tomorrow, they shall fall." The household dispersed in disarray. Sir Reginald stormed away, muttering of insults to his honor. Lady Beatrice wept quietly as Clara comforted her with surprising gentleness. Dr. March stalked off in fury, his heavy tread echoing down the corridor. Only Pinkerton remained calm. He closed the escritoire with quiet finality, then stood by the window, gazing into the night. The stars shone cold above the yews, and the manor lay hushed, its secrets pressed close. He murmured to himself, "The pattern is complete. One thread remains, and when it is drawn, the whole tapestry will fall." In his pocketbook lay the fragments of truth, the brass button, the poison tonic, the half-written letter, the torn confession, the broken seal. Each piece alone was nothing, but together they formed a picture clear to his disciplined mind. The game was nearly over. Tomorrow would bring the revelation. Chapter 8, The Truth Unveiled. The following morning dawned sharp and clear, as though nature herself sought to sweep away the fog that had long enveloped Greystone Manor. Yet within, the household was cloaked in tension thicker than any mist. At Pinkerton's command, the company assembled in the library at 10 o'clock. The great fire burned bright, but its warmth did little to soften the chill of expectation. Sir Reginald stood stiff by the hearth, mustache bristling with indignation. Lady Beatrice, pale and drawn, occupied her carved chair, Clara Vale at her side with calm composure restored. Dr. March hovered near the sideboard, his movements restless, his color high. Lionel, weak but resolute, sat propped in a cushioned chair, Cray the butler nearby should he falter. Allan Pinkerton entered last, his bearing precise, his expression serene. He carried his pocketbook, the silent repository of every fragment of evidence. He placed it upon the table, then turned to face them. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began softly, "we have played long enough with shadows. Today we shall have light. The theft of the letters, the attempts to silence young Lionel, the false trails and forged papers, all are parts of a single design. That design, though carefully woven, has now unraveled." A silence followed, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Pinkerton opened his pocketbook and withdrew the items one by one, placing them in a neat row upon the table. The brass button from the garden. The tonic bottle tainted with poison. The half-written letter, imitating Sir Reginald's hand. The fragments of confession, hastily destroyed. And the broken seal upon a chamber door. Each piece is small, but together they reveal the truth. Sir Reginald gave a snort. "Then speak, man, and end this mummery." Pinkerton inclined his head slightly. "Patience, Sir Reginald. For the truth must be built brick by brick, else it collapses." He turned first to Lady Beatrice. "Madam, you feared these letters more than anyone. Their exposure would have destroyed more than reputation, it would have threatened influence in the highest political circles. Yet you did not steal them. Your fear was real, but your courage failed you. You lacked the ruthlessness." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded faintly. Next he faced Clara Vale. "Miss Vale, you were found at the escritoire. You possessed keys, and you imitated handwriting. You played the accomplice of secrecy, perhaps even the instrument of concealment. Yet your actions sprang not from guilt, but from loyalty, to Lady Beatrice, whom you sought to protect. Your guilt is of silence, not of crime." Clara bowed her head, relief flickering across her face. "Sir Reginald," Pinkerton continued, "your bluster has masked unease. The forged letter was designed to implicate you, to suggest you had urged the destruction of the papers. But forgery is clumsy in its concealment. The hand that mimicked yours failed in detail. You are vain, sir, and pompous, but not the poisoner." Reginald harumphed loudly, muttering of vindication. Pinkerton's eyes moved last to Dr. March. His voice, though soft, carried an edge of steel. "Doctor, you alone had access to Lionel's food and medicine. You alone explained away his symptoms with eager haste. You alone were caught breaking my seal at midnight. Your joviality has been but a mask, and your restlessness the tremor of guilt. The poison was yours. The theft was yours. And the letters, where are they now?" March's face flushed scarlet, then drained to gray. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Beads of sweat broke upon his brow. Pinkerton pressed on, relentless. "Your motive is simple. The letters spoke of financial impropriety, debts, fraudulent dealings, in which you were entangled. Exposure would have ruined you. So you stole them, and when Lionel stumbled near the truth, you twice sought to silence him. Your hand dropped poison into his cup, and your courage faltered when you thought to destroy the fragments of confession. That is the truth, and it is complete. A gasp rose from Lady Beatrice, a cry from Clara. Sir Reginald swore violently. March staggered back, his hands groping for support. It is lies, he burst out at last, voice shaking. Lies spun by a foreigner with tricks and scraps of paper. You cannot prove. But Lionel, summoning strength, spoke from his chair. I saw you, Doctor. That night when I drank the tonic, you were at my side. You poured it. March's face contorted. With a sudden, desperate motion, he lunged for the door. But Pinkerton was quicker. With calm precision, he extended his cane, tripping the man so that he crashed to the floor. Cray was upon him in an instant, holding him fast. Pinkerton closed his pocketbook with finality. Proof enough, gentlemen. The little grey cells do not lie. Every fragment spoke of you. You thought yourself clever, Doctor, but truth has a voice louder than deceit. Lady Beatrice wept quietly, Clara at her side. Sir Reginald muttered darkly of disgrace and scandal. Lionel leaned back, pale but relieved.